For a minute, we all thought that Trump would attack Iran any moment. US Armada set sail. Fighter jets started relocating. The gun was loaded and ready to shoot. But suddenly, everything descaled. When Trump threatened strikes in early 2026, Riyadh denied airspace, denied bases, denied automatic loyalty. Tehran warned the Gulf states that any US base used against Iran would become a target. Missiles, proxies, Hormuz. The math looked brutal. Then the quiet line between Riyadh and Tehran held. That line existed because Beijing brokered it in 2023. So tonight we argue, did Saudi Arabia and China jointly diffuse a US-Iran spiral that Washington itself could not control? And did China earn the title of peacemaker by doing, not tweeting? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Let's go back to the hinge moment, 10th March 2023. Beijing hosted the final trilateral talks. Iran and Saudi Arabia restored diplomatic ties after 7 years of rupture. Iraq and Oman handled earlier rounds, but China stamped the guarantee. Oil leverage spoke loudly. Iran depended on Chinese buyers for 90% of its exports. Saudi counted China as a key customer. Embassies reopened. Non-interference pledges surfaced. Yemen temperature dropped. Fast forward to 2026. That architecture held under fire. Without that Chinese brokered détente, would Riyadh have blocked US strikes and nudged diplomacy instead of escalation? This is not romance. This is arithmetic. Trump revived maximum pressure. Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025 obliterated Iranian nuclear sites. An Israel-Iran war flared and ended on June 24th. Protests shook Iran in January of 2026. An armada moved. Tehran threatened to hit US bases across the Gulf. Prince Sultan Air Base sat within range. Nafcent and Jubail sat within range. Escan village stood exposed. Riyadh read the board. War meant retaliation. Retaliation meant oil shock. Oil shock meant Vision 2030 under siege. So Saudi Arabia refused access. That refusal carried weight because a détente existed, and that détente carried a Chinese signature. Saudi hedging looked disciplined, not dramatic. Riyadh urged neighbors against US strikes. Riyadh warned Iran against targeting Gulf bases. Riyadh refused airspace. Riyadh lobbied Washington. MBS called President Pezeshkian of Iran on the 27th of January and stressed diplomacy. The UAE, Oman, Qatar echoed caution. Washington shifted from strikes to sanctions. Oman-mediated talks resumed by February. Tension eased. No fireworks, no victory laps, just de-escalation. That sequence did not arise from slogans. It arose from managed rivalry forged in Beijing. China's leverage never hid. It imported roughly 1.4 million barrels per day of Iranian oil, about 13 to 15% of total Chinese imports. That flow delivered $30 to $40 billion annually to Tehran despite sanctions. A 25-year comprehensive partnership pledged $400 billion in investments across oil and infrastructure. BRI corridors ran through Iranian geography. Trade touched 25% of Iran's total in 2024. A US strike risked Hormuz disruption. Hormuz carried 20% of global oil. Prices could spike beyond $150 per barrel. China's economy would absorb the shock, so Beijing protected its artery. Stability served interest. Interest served mediation. Call it self-interest, call it strategy, it still produced results. Proxy clashes in Yemen fell sharply after the 2023 deal. Working groups on security appeared. OIC convergence surfaced. In July of 2025, Arakchi met Prince Khalid bin Salman and discussed borders, Yemen, Palestine, and de-escalation. In April of 2025, The Saudi prince visited Tehran and met Khamenei, conveying no support for strikes on Iran or the Houthis. In January 2026, foreign ministers spoke again. On February 10th, Saudi leadership congratulated Iran's president on National Day. Civility persisted amid stress. That continuity boxed escalation. Now contrast posture and performance. Trump unveiled a 20-point Gaza peace plan in September 2025 and a board of peace in January 2026. He hailed historic ceremonies and everlasting peace. Phase 1 ceasefire held. 9 nations joined the board. Funding pledges emerged. Fine. But on Iran, Gulf states denied the battlefield. Saudi autonomy grew. Riyadh balanced alliance with engagement. Trump threatened. Riyadh calculated. Beijing's earlier deal supplied the buffer. One actor broadcast. Another locked in oil, ports, and a truce that endured a war scare. Look at the flashpoints through this lens. Yemen saw reduced clashes as Iran scaled back overt support and Saudi reasserted broker role while managing UAE rifts. Gaza discussions emphasized humanitarian aid while both critiqued Israel and prioritized stability. Informal maritime coordination surfaced around Hormuz and Bab el-Mandab to protect energy flows. Post-2025 nuclear tensions produced hedging, not war. Saudi pursued US arms frameworks worth $142 billion while mediating a bridge. Iran defended borders and sought Gulf economic lifelines. Managed rivalry replaced open hostility. That framework lowered the ceiling on chaos. The risks never vanished. Miscalculation over energy disputes could ignite. Proxies lingered. Missile arsenals stood ready. Iranian warnings named bases across Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, Turkey as legitimate targets if they aided US operations. Patriots and THAAD faced saturation risk. The 2019 Abqaiq precedent proved defenses permeable. A direct hit on Ras Tanura or Prince Sultan Air Base could halt supply and crater GDP. Refugee waves could surge, capital could flee, Gulf sovereign funds could strain. Yet, the détente reduced the probability of ignition. Probability matters. China's role stayed bounded. It did not enforce compliance. It did not veto US deployments. It urged restraint during the 2025 strikes and avoided direct intervention. Pledges sometimes lagged due to sanctions risk, but the core bargain held because interests aligned. Beijing secured oil and BRI corridors. Riyadh secured stability and Vision 2030 runway. Tehran secured economic oxygen and regional breathing space. None embraced ideology. All embraced survival. That triangle constrained escalation when the Armada loomed. So is China the new peacemaker? In select arenas, yes. It brokered the Saudi-Iran restoration. It sustained dialogue through 2026. It leveraged oil dependence and investment scale. It framed mediation as sovereignty, respecting and non-interfering. It contributed over 2,500 UN peacekeepers, the most among P5 nations. It proposed plans in Ukraine and mediated smaller disputes in Asia. It projected a global security initiative. Yet, it prioritized partners and energy nodes. It avoided clashes with US power where costs spiked. It mediated where stakes paid dividends. Motives matter. Beijing acted because the US attack on Iran threatened Chinese energy security. 40% of China's oil imports tied to Gulf flows through these straits. Hormuz closure threatened that artery. War threatened $400 billion in pledged projects. War threatened a regime that diverted US focus from Taiwan and the South China Sea. War threatened volatility that could echo domestically. Altruism played a minor role. Self-interest drove urgency, but self-interest aligned with de-escalation. In geopolitics, alignment beats sermons. Saudi Arabia's calculus also reflected autonomy. Riyadh balanced US alliance with Iran engagement. It refused to become a proxy battlefield. It signaled red lines to Washington. It communicated with Tehran. It hedged arms deals with outreach. It preserved Abraham Accords ties while boxing escalation. It pursued Vision 2030 and tourism over trench lines. That posture required a prior thaw. China supplied that thaw. Without embassies and working channels, refusal would look like betrayal. With détente, refusal looked like prudence. Iran played its part. It warned Gulf states but clarified targets focused on US assets, not host nations. It stressed regional stability in January 2026 talks amid protests. It sought pilgrim services and Islamic Development Bank collaborations. It viewed Gulf ties as vital amid sanctions. It reduced covert or overt Houthi support in line with de-escalation. It hedged nuclear tensions while defending borders. Pragmatism replaced maximalism. That shift did not arise in a vacuum. It arose under a framework brokered in Beijing. Now the hard comparison. Trump boasted about deals. China locked in oil contracts and reopened embassies. Trump threatened obliteration deadlines. China convened trilaterals and pressed for non-interference. Trump deployed carriers. Saudi denied runways. Washington pivoted to sanctions. Oman resumed talks. De-escalation followed. Credit flows along the chain of casualty. The 2023 Saudi-Iran deal formed the first link. China forged that link. Riyadh used it to deter strikes. Tensions cooled. That sequence reads like action, not applause. Does this crown China as global peacemaker? Not yet. It excels in managed rivalries where economic leverage runs deep. It falters where impartiality demands costs. It shields partners and avoids moral crusades. It vetoes when allies face censure. It practices selective activism. But in the Gulf, selective activism delivered stability when a single spark could ignite a regional war. That counts. One more angle matters. This episode marked Gulf autonomy from automatic US policy alignment. Saudi Arabia refused access despite alliance ties. The UAE, Oman, Qatar echoed caution. The Gulf chose self-preservation over spectacle. That autonomy emerged within a détente architecture China helped design. It signaled a post-US security architecture under construction, one that balances arms deals with dialogue and hedges with pragmatism. And what of India? New Delhi held stakes in Iran through Chabahar and trade, though far smaller than China's scale. It held strong ties with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It prized strategic autonomy, yet it did cede the mediation spotlight. Sanctions risk loomed, US tariffs and market access weighed heavily. Chabahar funding signaled retreat as waivers neared expiry. India chose caution over convening power. Stability served Indian interests, but leadership required stepping forward. Beijing stepped forward first and locked in leverage. Opportunity favors the actor willing to pay the entry cost. The outlook through 2026 favors pragmatic coexistence. Détente likely holds through year-end. Deep reconciliation remains distant. Rhetoric softens while proxies linger. Armada deployments test limits. Saudi Arabia mediation offers a bridge. Yemen stabilization and cautious trade could solidify gains. The nuclear shadow persists, but the trajectory favors managed rivalry over confrontation. That trajectory traces back to a deal signed in Beijing. So answer the opening question with clarity. Saudi Arabia and China played a major role in diffusing US-Iran tensions. That diffusion became possible because China negotiated the Saudi-Iran thaw in 2023. China did not rescue Iran with troops. It secured a framework that reduced incentives for war. It acted to protect extensive financial interests in Iran and Gulf energy flows. Self-interest drove it. Results validated it. In a region allergic to sermons and addicted to leverage, Beijing used leverage. Washington used threats. The runway stayed closed, the missiles stayed silent, the detour held. Thank you for watching Statecraft.